Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Steps for Successful Secondary Transition Planning. Today is Measurable Annual IEP Goals and Post-Secondary Goals Aligned. So my name is Janine Schultz. I'm Director of Training at the Peel Center. And with me today, I have Michael Storr and Lily Sellers. Lily, if you want to turn your camera on and say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Hi. And as they start, Michael and Lily will introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about themselves. I've been with the Peel Center now for 4 years. I'm also a parent as well. The Peel Center, these are our 6 core. The graphic here represents the 6 key strategies used by Peel to complete our work. Families and youth are the center of our work, surrounded by their communities and the professionals who work with them. So we have outreach. We outreach to different communities, underserved communities. We have resources that we can send you. There's also resources on our website. Our parent advisors provide individual assistance for people that need assistance with their child's IEP or transition services. We have trainings available. We have a list of them on our website. And you can request one directly from our website. We have leadership development sessions, both for family members and for youth. And we also partnership with different agencies across the Commonwealth.
And I'm Michael Storr, and I work for the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the Collaborative. We are a jointly funded center by the Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level, as well as with the joint funding, the Rehabilitation Services Administration, or RSA. And both of those agencies actually fall under the federal department that sits in the Department of Education called OSERS, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. We just started our new 5-year grant in October, and it runs until September of 2025. And I work at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And we have partners from East Tennessee State University, the George Washington University, Portland State Universities, and then the University of Kansas, Maryland, and Oregon. The primary purpose of NTAC, the collaborative, is to help students and youth with disabilities better prepare for graduate from high school with the knowledge, skills, and supports that they need to go on for further training, employment, and to live independently engaged in their communities.
So in today's session, everybody here will be able to, what we're going to do is discuss what families need to know about the topic and put it into practice and how it applies to your child's IEP. We're going to discuss the importance of services and activities during transition planning. And we're also going to describe how the topic aligns with the Transition Discovery Guide. The Transition Discovery Guide was developed by collecting voices and experiences from youth, families, and stakeholders across the Commonwealth. And this collection of indicators and sub-indicators can be used as a roadmap to guide your transition plan. Some of our key reminders here: transition services must be addressed at the IEP meeting. So, you know, in the state of Pennsylvania, when a student turns 14, so the year they turn 14, so if they're not turning 14 until December, that transition plan, really, the team should get together and start planning that the very beginning of that school year. But it doesn't just have to start then. It can start earlier if the parent requests it. Secondary transition planning is a coordinated effort between families and students, schools and agencies, and support agencies, support services. So up until this point, all of the services really are involved with your district. When you're looking at secondary transition planning, you really want to expand your circle, and you want to look for what are those community supports and the agencies within your community that can shed some light, give some support and add to the student's education plan when it comes to transition services. And planning for a successful secondary transition begins with a vision. So what is that vision? And the vision can be, what's important to your child? What does your child like doing? Where does your child like doing whatever the activity is? What are their, needs, wants, dreams, and desires? Like, look at all of that as you're starting to plan the transition plan. What jobs might fit the interest? For example, I'll use my daughter for example. She really loved photography. Our school district didn't have any photography courses. So when she was looking at her post-secondary education, we really looked at a neighboring school district and contracted out with them to use their program along with their secondary transition program, which allowed her to go to Point Park University for photography. She now does that on the side. She does beautiful photos, but without networking outside of our circle, that would not have been possible. So really look at, think outside the box, and all the possibilities and all the people that within your community and your inner circles that might help along the way. So the secondary transition process, we have 8 areas of focus. We started this back in September, I believe, Michael, right? Back in September. And we will be, most of you think that our next one is going to end next month. And we do have a little bonus one coming up in June, which will be on healthcare. It's going to be the move to adult healthcare. So these will be extended for 1 additional month, and we will end this the end of June. But all of these sessions are recorded so that you guys can go back and view them.
Great, thanks, Janine. So over the past 7 sessions that we had, we presented information regarding youth self-determination and self-advocacy, the importance of understanding and engaging with outside agencies to assist with the transition process, understanding and using age-appropriate assessment for transition-age students with disabilities. Also, we talked about how to develop the 3 post-secondary goal areas that must be addressed for all transition-age students who have IEPs. And during the last 2 sessions, we talked about how to ensure that students have a thoughtful course of study and appropriate transition services and activities that are aligned to their post-secondary goals. All of these sessions are available and can be found at the PEAL website at www.pealcenter.org, and they're under the Transition Tuesdays. So if you missed them, you can find all the recordings and related materials. During today's session, we'll be presenting information regarding measurable annual goals that are aligned to post-secondary goals or post-secondary outcomes. Also wanted to talk a little bit about this, and Janine mentioned about transition discoveries. And transition discoveries in the Transition Quality Empowerment Project, or TQEP, is a project led by staff from the George Washington University in collaboration with the PEAL Center and the Pennsylvania Youth Leadership Network, PYLN. And it's provided through funding by the Pennsylvania Developmental Disabilities Council, and is designed to work with youth and families and other stakeholders to enhance secondary transition programming and services while students are in school, and to increase successful student post-school outcomes. Transition Discoveries is a program that is being implemented throughout Pennsylvania through the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, or PATN, and the Intermediate Unit Systems, or the IUs, along with the engagement and support of Pennsylvania's interagency partners. Included in Transition Discoveries are 9 secondary transition-related areas that are further broken down into 55 sub-indicators that can be used as a roadmap to guide a student's transition plan. The 9 secondary transition-related areas and sub-indicators are presented in this program through definitions, characteristics, outcomes, and meaningful stories that are told by families and transition stakeholders and youth. Be sure to check out, they do have a really wonderful website it's transitiondiscoveries.org. And on the next slide, we're going to look at what specific sections of Transition Discoveries are aligned to measurable annual goals. So this slide outlines specifically the sub-indicator areas that are addressed by Transition Discoveries that are directly related to a student's measurable annual goals that are aligned to post-secondary goals. These include transition planning, post-secondary education and training, employment, and independent living and community engagement. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Janine.
So when we talk about the measurable annual IEP goals and post-secondary goals aligned, the next slide we'll talk about the measurable annual goals. So they really are at the core of the student's individual education program. If you don't have that piece in place, you really don't have a good plan moving forward. They must provide a clear description of the skills the student needs in order to access, participate, and make progress in the general education curriculum. So and from year to year, that piece can change. So you want to make sure that you stay on top of the goals and they're very precise at what you're asking. You want them to relate directly to the areas of need identified in the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance section in the IEP. So again, you can always come back and add to that piece. And if if your student, if there is something that happens within your family, something that might be traumatic and a reassessment might need to happen, you can come back and tweak these, but make sure that they're very clear as you go through the process. When we look at the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, it is impossible to write a clear and measurable annual goal if you don't have a clear and measurable present level of academic achievement and functional performance. So, for instance, I'll use my daughter again as an example. So we actually requested that the school district not just do the regular standard assessments, but we went out and looked for different assessments that we requested as part of the process. That looked at her specific areas of need because we wanted to be very specific as we built her transition plan. The present levels include the parent input. So, your voice as a parent is really important, but you want to make sure that you keep your child in the forefront as you're putting that input in there. The evaluation data. I can't say enough about the evaluation data. You really have to have good evaluation data to have a really full and successful transition plan. Assessments and interest surveys, again, extremely valuable, and observations. So it's not just pen to paper. I mean, it's through observations and conversations, and you want to take all of that information into account as you're moving your plan forward. Measurable annual goals. You really want to look at how do you build the skills? Consider prioritizing 3 to 5 goals for most students. So I've heard a lot of people say that they want 100 different goals in there, but if you make your goals broad enough, a lot of stuff can fit within those goals. So you really want to look at 3 to 5 goals for most students, not all, but for most. The expectation is that after 1 year of instruction, the student will reach that goal. So as you come up with a goal, so there's a long-term goal, and then you might have 3 short-term goals to get there. So as you come up with that goal, then you would work backwards as you outline what those short-term objectives are. And again, you can tweak those throughout your school year. You want to begin with a baseline of what are the present levels, and you want to make sure that you're not guessing at that. And if you can't get an exact level, you can go out and request for a different type of evaluation to be done to pull that data in. You want to make sure it contains measurable, countable data, and are written to include progress monitoring. So again, you want to make sure that you're always looking at, is the student progressing? If not, why? And then you want to address that why, if that tends to be the case. Measurable annual goals and short-term objectives. For students aged 14 to 21, every measurable annual goal and short-term objective supports the student's post-secondary goal. So know that, so high school, typically people graduate around the age of 18. A student with an IEP that has not met their goals can choose to what is called bank their diploma. So they can walk with their graduating class. They would receive a certificate or a blank diploma, and the school district banks their diploma up until the age of 21. So the student can continue to work on their post-secondary goals and transition planning up through the age of 21. Short-term objectives must be part of any and every measurable annual goal for students participating in the PASA, the PASA, the Pennsylvania Alternative System of Assessments, and can be part of any and every measurable annual goal for all students. So that doesn't change if your child is taking the PASA. So it has to be part of that as well.
Great, thanks, Janine. So we also wanted to talk a little bit about what measurable annual goals and objectives are not. So when they're written, they should not be specifically written to just a curriculum or a specific subject area. So you wouldn't have, for example, a biology goal or an art goal. You're really looking at the skills that student is working on to be successful. So it is possible if the student has a reading comprehension goal, for example, that in biology, they are working on that reading comprehension goal as part of that student's involvement in the biology course. So it's a reading comprehension goal that's using that biology class as a condition or a place where that goal is going to be looked at and worked on. Measurable annual goals should also not be passing grades. And I have, unfortunately, have seen that, that Johnny or Mary will receive 80% in all classes. Again, it needs to be specific. It needs to be based on that student's specific needs that they have, and look at what areas that student is going to be working on. Activities such as visiting a college fair or job shadowing, and we talked about a lot of different activities and services in the last webinar we had. Again, those are great. They're great as activities, but those are not specifically written as a measurable annual goal. Again, measurable annual goals need to be related to a skill deficit area or an area that that student is working on. There also are no such things as a, quote, transition goal. And I know sometimes I'll hear this and they'll say, oh, well, these two goals are the transition goals. What we really like to say as an effective practice is that starting at age 14 in Pennsylvania, all the students' measurable annual goals are, in fact, transition goals, because they're helping that student reach those post-secondary goal areas of going on for further training, employment, and independent living. And as a last reminder, there's a big difference between a measurable annual goal that's looking at, again, those skill areas that that student is going to work on, opposed to post-secondary goals that are based on what the student will do once they exit high school, once they graduate from high school, and go on for further training, employment, and independent living. It's also important to note that measurable annual goals must be skill building. So these goals must focus on that area of need that will allow that student to make the most gain. And those gains are in accessing education and learning, participating in both school and academic classes and activities, as well as in the community, that allow that student to make progress in the general education curriculum and in the community and in school. And ultimately, at age 14, these goals are helping that student make progress toward their post-secondary goals. So this next section, we want to just take a couple minutes and break down what exactly is contained in a measurable annual goal. So we're going to be looking at the condition, the student's name, the clearly defined behavior of the goal, and then how we are going to measure that that student has met that goal. So how well they've done, how consistently, and then it also should include how frequently we'll be monitoring that goal for success. So the first area we want to look at is the condition. And this describes the situation in which the student will perform that particular goal. So information from the present education levels are used to help describe the conditions under which that behavior is performed. When reviewing the condition section of the IEP, check to see that the goal describes when or under what conditions the behavior will take place, what the student will use to perform the behavior, and where the behavior will be observed. So we have a few examples here describing the materials, the situation, or the setting. So things such as during lunch breaks, on the job, or given a picture checklist to follow, using grade level passages, given a two-step direction, given a grocery list, or using the alarm feature on their cell phone. Maybe that's to finish an assignment or as a scheduling reminder. The next thing that we look at is the student name that's written in the goal. And again, this should not be a problem. However, sometimes people cut and paste, or they're not really looking at the specific name of that individual student, or the pronouns change. And we just wanted to make a point that we really want to make sure that the IEP itself is individualized, but also that we're being very careful that these measurable annual goals are individualized to that particular student. So the next area of a goal is looking at what is actually going to happen. What is that clearly defined behavior you want to see that student working on? So make sure that when that goal is written and you're reading it, that one, it's understandable. You can understand what your son or daughter is going to do, and that the student understands what the goal is. Make sure that you're not using fuzzy words in this section. That what is written in the goal is an actual behavior. It's an action that's being described. That it is, again, described in terms that the student would understand. And one of the things that, as a clue or as a reminder, and one of the handouts you have for today kind of outlines looking at all the parts of the goal. And one of the suggestions there is, if you close your eyes, can you picture that child, that student, doing the goal? If you can't picture them doing the goal, then it's not a good goal. The other thing that is mentioned on this worksheet is if a dead man can do that particular activity. So for example, Johnny will not talk out loud. Again, it should be what you're defining as that actionable goal that you can see them doing. So some examples are to say, to print, to write, to read orally, to point. You can actually see those. Non-examples would be things like Johnny will understand, or Mary will know, or Mary will comprehend. You can't see those things. However, you could add a descriptor. Johnny will comprehend what he's read by answering the questions on the worksheet. You could see that part. So again, clearly defining and detailing in actionable terms what that individual student will do. So this next section is we're looking at the performance criteria. And we look at 3 different levels for performance criteria. And those 3 major components of performance criteria are the criterion level, the number of times that the student should demonstrate that level, and the evaluation schedule. The criterion level is the functional performance level the student must demonstrate for mastery. In other words, for example, in reading 125 words per minute, or with 97% accuracy. The number of times the student should demonstrate the criterion level is often forgotten when writing goals. it's important because it specifies what is required to reach mastery. And then lastly, the evaluation schedule addresses how frequently the teacher plans to assess the student's mastery of the objective and the method by which that teacher will evaluate progress and/or the completion of the goal. Performance criteria should help set up test situations that will aid in the progress monitoring. So these next few slides break this down a little further. So on this slide, we're looking at the performance criteria and some examples of how well. So again, these are the percentage of time with fewer than a certain number of errors, or maybe it's words or digit correct completed per minute, with no more than so many times that it's something is not done, rating scales, rubrics, or completed independently. Those are all different types of how well performance criteria. Here are looking at the consistency and how frequently the monitoring will take place as a couple examples. So looking here in 3 out of 5 random trials or 5 consecutive trials or 9 out of 10 trials, that's the consistency part. And then how frequently monitoring will occur. Now, normally we don't see daily as a progress monitoring of a goal because it really becomes cumbersome to evaluate and monitor. However, conversely, you don't want to see quarterly or every 9 weeks because that's way too long to really monitor progress on a goal. So sometimes you'll see a couple times per week or weekly or bi-weekly as ways of measuring a individual's performance on a certain goal.
So Michael, a question, yes. Who all can monitor that progress?
So the progress really can be monitored by anyone who's directly working with that student. So sometimes it's a special education teacher. If that special education teacher is working directly with that student, or it could be a general education classroom teacher, so the English teacher, the science teacher, the history teacher. Sometimes it's a collaboration, depending on the goal. Sometimes a student will monitor their goal and have it also aligned with a staff person. If it's a community-based goal, sometimes paraprofessionals or support people will help to monitor a goal. So it really does depend. And I think an effective practice sometimes will list in the goal who exactly would be doing the monitoring. So the next slide we just want to look at is looking at the condition, the name, the clearly defined behavior and performance criteria, and kind of breaking it down into more of a chart form. And I've actually have used this. So when I review goals, and I've reviewed a lot of goals in my lifetime, I'll actually write the parts into this kind of chart or this grid. So I'll write down, okay, what is the condition? Is the student's name there? What is the behavior? What is the performance criteria? And actually kind of map it out to see what's there. It's helpful. So when we're looking again at measurable annual IEP goals, a rule of thumb in effective practice is if a goal has been listed in any one of the 3 areas, so this is post-secondary goals, for further training, employment, and independent living, the recommendation is that there needs to be at least 1 activity and 1 measurable annual goal aligned to that. While there are no federal or state regulations that require measurable annual goals to be listed in the grid, all of them to be listed in the grid, there is a requirement that there is an alignment in the transition grid section to at least 1 measurable annual goal. And again, as an effective practice, we do recommend that all of the students' measurable annual goals, and as Janine mentioned, for many, many students, that's 3 to 5 goals, that those 3 to 5 goals are somewhere referenced in section 3, the transition grid section of the IEP in Pennsylvania. So over the last several sessions, we've been using this graphic organizer to walk through looking at post-secondary goals, looking at then the courses of study that student is engaging with, the transition services and activities they're involved with, and now the last step of this graphic organizer is seeing what that annual IEP goal is. And what this is really showing is this alignment, right? From post-secondary goal, then the classes the kid's taking or the courses, the activities that they're involved with, and then what goals they're working on. So they are connected. So next up, we are very excited once again during this webinar to have Lily and information from Shania to share some information regarding their information related to transition, their IEPs, and today, their measurable annual goals. If you've been participating in our webinar series thus far, you'll remember that Lily Sellers is a dual enrolled student at Boiling Springs High School in the South Middleton School District and is also attending Harrisburg Community College. And Shania Jones is a student in the Pittsburgh Public School District. I'm now going to turn this over to Lily, and she's going to first share some examples and non-examples of IEP goals. And then she's going to go on and talk about one of her measurable annual goals and actually show you one of her, it's a screenshot of her IEP Section 3 transition grid and how that measurable annual goal aligns to it. And then she's also going to share that same information for Shania. So with that, Lily, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. So starting out with the non-example is Jordan will answer comprehension questions with 80% accuracy. This isn't a very good example because it's not very specific on the goals. So for the examples, given grade level reading content at Jordan's independent reading level, he will read and use comprehension skills to retell 5 details of the story, such as character, setting, and problem, and getting 4 out of 5 details correct.
And that should actually be problem solving, a little typo on that. So I don't think poor Jordan has problems, but yeah, sorry about that, Lily. There should be problems. That's okay.
Okay, so non-example. Similar to the last one, Sophie will get an 80% correct on a biology unit quiz. Again, not very specific, doesn't really give the student very good steps to move forward. Well, with the example, while participating in 12th grade biology, Sophie will be able to name and describe the 4 big ideas from each unit of study with 80% accuracy for each unit. So my measurable annual goal. So I will be presented with the need to take notes without guided notes or within a lecture style note-taking situation. I will utilize an appropriate learned note-taking strategy to assist me with taking notes in these instances 100% of the time. This will be monitored during 5-day school weeks by her personal nurse and her special education case manager. So I've tried out a lot of different things to help me take notes. This has been a big problem that I've had for a long time, is keeping up with handwriting during lectures. Right now, the biggest thing that's helped me is typing and learning how to abbreviate and condense notes. I've also had success with recording if the teacher allows it. And I've also tried devices like a smart pen that combines recording and writing, which I did not have so much success with because I am not very good at handwriting due to my muscle fatigue. And then my progress will be reported quarterly. So here's a screenshot of my IEP part of the document. You can see we have my post-secondary education and training goals at the top, as well as my courses of study and different services and activities that will help me achieve my goals. And then at the bottom, you can see the measurable annual goal, which is what we just discussed on the previous slide. So
Lily,
Shania,
just a quick question. Are there differences in your supports from high school versus college?
So next year I will be attending my first year of college, so I can't really, I don't know too many specifics yet, but definitely same with the note taking will help me a lot. I know that there's a lot of note taking that's needed in college, and I will definitely need more accommodations because I have a physical disability and I use a wheelchair. So I will need those kind of physical accommodations on campus if I choose to live there.
Thank you.
So Shania's measurable annual goal. Given a 5th grade reading level nonfiction reading passage, Shania will identify key concepts and summarize the passage with an 85% accuracy based upon bi-weekly assessments. She will also take easy CBM assessments, and her progress will be reported quarterly. And here you can see her IEP document as well, with her post-secondary education training goals and her service and activities. And then the measurable goal we saw on the other slide and kind of how she will make progress toward these goals.
And I think the important point, Lily, for both you and Shania is what you were doing with your measuring your goals was direct connection to the fact you wanted to go on to college, right?
Yes, yep.
Yep.
So some reminders, even with the best plans, life changes. Adjust your plans as your needs change with time. And remember that you are not alone in the process. Use all available resources and definitely don't be afraid to ask for help.
Great. Thanks so much, Lily, and thanks for going over those slides, the examples and non-examples, as well as your measurement your goals and Shania's. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Janine.
It's always helpful if you unmute yourself.
It's okay.
So I think I had said earlier, we were originally, our sessions were going to end on May 25th. We do have a bonus session on healthcare transition, which will take place on June 22nd. The name of that presentation is The Move to Adult Healthcare, and that will be presented by Kelly King from the Peel Center. So look forward to those. And again, all of these are recorded, so you guys can go back. Michael had talked about there's a link on the Peel website that takes you back to all of these recordings. So we have given you some resources. So there is a handouts tab that you guys have. There's 5 different handouts, along with we have a writing effective IEP goals. This link will take you to the patent website to get that documentation. We've also given you measurable annual goal writing, the check sheet for that, and also considerations for measurable goals and specifically designed instruction. So look at that handout tab for those resources.
So as we're starting to wrap up, and I'll actually kind of throw this out to Kayla and see if there's any questions, but just wanted to remind folks of the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the collaborative where I work. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation, we're a newly funded center, and we are in the process right now just putting the finishing touches on our new website and the landing page. So when you go there, you really need to go back up to our old NTAC site and the WinTAC site. But we're hoping in a week or two we will have that up and more operational. If you have any questions though, or would like additional information, please email us at ntac-collab@uncc.edu. And finally, we do send out an email blast of a lot of information regarding what's happening around secondary transition across the country. So if you haven't done so already, you can go to transitionta.org and you can sign up for our weekly email blast.
So Michael, we do have a question. When should independence be added to a goal?
I think if that is kind of what someone is working to, you want it to be something that that student can obtain and achieve within the course of the IEP year. And you notice we've been saying IEP year because IEPs don't necessarily just start for one school year, like start in September and end in June. Oftentimes IEPs might be written in, for example, January, in which case it's covering 2 school years. So that said, you know, it's really looking at how well that student is able to perform a particular task or you know, what area that they need to improve on. So say, for example, it's that the student is going to be following a 4-step direction, right? And right now, in order for that student to follow that 4-step direction, they need a lot of prompts, they need some visual cues, and they're only able to do that at about, say, 75% accuracy. Probably saying they're going to do that independently is not realistic over the course of a 1 IEP year. However, if that student and you're trying to get them to follow a 4-step direction and they want to work on the job site and they're already at 85 or 90% at that level, then saying independently would probably make sense because you could get to that 100% or that independent level. So again, it depends on the student and it depends on their level of ability, independence, and how much support they might need. And that doesn't mean you couldn't have an independent goal and that still that student is using some type of strategy or assistive technology to support them. That's a tool to help them. They could still be independent. So I don't know, Janine, any questions?
So what is the difference? We have a couple of more questions here. So what is the difference between a percentage and a 4 to 5 opportunities in the goal?
So 4 to 5 opportunities could be looking at those choices. I mean, they're similar because it's criteria, right? But it's the number of times that the student is given the opportunity to actually complete that task. So it's not just a once and done type of thing. So once a month, you're having the student, say, read a reading passage and take a quiz. It makes more sense that maybe it's once a week or every other week that the student is given that opportunity to complete a task. The idea behind that is you're providing that student ample opportunity to show mastery of a goal. Percentages, again, it is a criteria area, but you're looking at more of a percent that that student is getting. Usually percentages are equated to you know, performance on answering questions. It's just you're using them for a different function, I guess, basically, Janine.
And I think this next one here I'll answer, and then Michael, you can fill in. So what options are there for students who cannot get a diploma? So students can graduate from their IEP. And I don't know if that's, you know, your whole question, but know that, you know, these really should be person-centered, right? It's about the student and the needs that they have. And you should be networking with a larger group out in the community, OVR, supports and services, different agencies, at building the skill set for what the student wants to do, regardless if it's gainful employment or volunteering someplace. So gainful employment is always the goal, but if the student wants to do something else, you're still building a skill set to move that student towards what they want to do for the rest of their life.
Janine, can you read the question again? I'm sorry.
Sure. What options are for students who cannot get a diploma?
Yeah, well, and I guess just to add to what Janine had mentioned, in Pennsylvania, all students, regardless of the disability, are entitled to or able to get a diploma. There are a number of states that do not offer diplomas to all students that have disabilities. You know, there are criteria levels. They have to reach certain types of credit issues. But in Pennsylvania, we only have one diploma, and you can either graduate based on credits or based on IEP goals. So unless a student would drop out of school, there really are, especially kids that have disabilities and IEPs, there's really, I'm going to make the broad statement, there's really no reason that they would not graduate with a diploma.
And I believe we have one final question, and there's some clarification here. So are there, and I think somebody's looking for examples, are there graphic organizers filled out somewhere in the resources, the ones that have goals connected to the activities?
There are, to be honest, it's been a couple years since I've looked on the patent website, but I know there were some examples that existed and some training examples. We also, if you go to the NTAC website, and it's not the, it won't be on the new landing page, but if you go into the NTAC site, we also give some examples of looking at post-secondary goals and measurable annual goals and activities. So you can find some there also. So I would look first on the patent website. I believe they're probably under secondary transition. There are probably still a couple examples of that, but also on the NTAC website, we have some resources. And I also think Rights Law, that advocacy website, there's some examples there also.
And know that if you guys have questions with that, you can always call for technical assistance at the Appeal Center. All right, no further questions, Michael.
Great. All right. Well, we look forward then to seeing you all next month. And again, it's not our last. You know, you get a bonus, as Janine was mentioning. So pretty exciting. So we will look forward to seeing you next month for the final in this series, the ongoing process. And basically what we want to talk about during that next session is, all right, an individual enters transition at age 14, but this is an ongoing process. And every year from 14 until that student graduates, either at 18, 19, 20, or 21, this process needs to continue. So again, that's May 25th is our next session in this webinar series, and then that bonus healthcare transition session on June 22nd. So thanks for joining us. Thanks, Janine. And I think we're good.
Thank you. Thank you both, Michael and Lily. See everybody next month. Have a good month.
Take care.